In the last video, I backed the Thesis and lined the spine with a hollow. In this video, I'll finish the binding by preparing the book for covering, cover in full buckram, and some other small jobs such as applying a label. The first thing I'll do is trim the hollow to the same height as the boards. I'll wrap a scrap piece of paper around the spine at the head and tail and mark the hollow to the same height as the boards and trim with scissors. To cover the book, I need to be able to turn in the cloth down into the hollow. To allow this, I will split the hollow at the head and tail for about 1 inch or 25 millimeters. I'll carefully do this with a straight bladed scalpel, being careful not to puncture the hollow with the scalpel tip. Then I trim the inside of the hollow flush with the ends of the text. You can use scissors or the scalpel to do this. Just be careful not to trim the outside of the hollow at the same time. I'll glue a piece of 2mm cord to the inside of the hollow. I use a piece long enough that it extends past the edges of the text block. Once it is dried, I'll trim it to the width from shoulder to shoulder. This will provide a reinforcing head cap to the head and tail of the covering material. If I were covering in leather, I would remove the tiny piece of the inside card of the boards that extends past the text where the French groove is. However, with buckram, I'm going to leave it, as forming the head caps with cloth is more difficult than with leather, and I think the bit of support for the cloth is useful. I'll quickly take the sharp edges off the boards and slightly round the corners using 320 grit sandpaper. I'll cut a piece of buckram to cover the book. I'm using 20mm turn-ins. I'll cut the cloth to the height of the book plus 40mm for the two turn-ins. But I'll leave the cloth wider than needed. It's hard to estimate the amount of cloth that will go into the grooves, and I can easily trim the cloth at the one fore-edge later. I'll mark the head, tail and right turn-ins on the cloth. I'll also mark where the joints are. I'm going to use 4mm knitting needles to press the cloth into the grooves. I get everything ready and then glue out the cloth for the back board. I'm using straight EVA. I also put some EVA in the grooves, but I make a slight mistake and put it in the front groove first. This just makes handling the book a bit more difficult. I place the book into position on the back cover and flip everything so I can work the cloth into the back groove. Then I finish gluing out the cloth and draw the cloth over the book, working the cloth into the front groove as I draw it over. Then I place the knitting needles into the grooves and place the book between pressing boards and press the book for a good 10 minutes. The turn-in for the front fore-edge should be too large at this point, so I trim it to 20mm. With the library corners, it doesn't matter if you turn in the head and tail or the fore-edges first. Before doing turn-ins, the corners need to be turned in. Just glue out the corners and fold them over onto the boards. It is convenient to turn in the fore-edges at this point. I'll press the book for a few minutes to let the corners settle. Turning in the head and tail can be a bit challenging because of the tightness of the joints. Make sure that the slits at the head and tail of the hollow haven't been glued closed, and if they have, force them open with something like a micro spatula. I'm going to use the flat end of the micro spatula to hold the joints open to make turning in easier. I glue out the turn-ins either side of the spine with straight EVA, and at the spine I use an EVA methylcellulose mix. I don't want the turn-ins that go down into the hollow to tack too quickly. I want time to work the cloth into the hollow and smooth it out and form it around the cord. My secret weapon for this is a Teflon bone folder that has been thinned and flattened. Once I've done the head and tail turn-ins, I'll put pressing tins inside the boards and place 5mm sash cord in the grooves and give the book a solid press for at least 10 minutes. I wasn't happy with the netting needles as they weren't quite wide enough, but a thicker netting needle would have been too high. The cord has the great advantage of squishing a bit and filling in the groove. My inclination would have been to put down the pastedowns closed. However, Middleton recommends putting them down open for a better opening book. Not wanting to argue with Middleton, I'll put them down open. I'll put straight EVA in the joint area and paste out the bulk of the pastedown with methyl cellulose. Since I'm not under production pressure, I can do these one at a time and let them dry before closing the boards. While the first one is drying, I'll make the label for the spine. A big advantage of casing a thesis is that the title can be put onto the spine directly before the book is cased in. I'll just use a label instead. I couldn't decide whether to make the label with the same coloured cloth or a contrasting colour cloth, and what foil to use for the lettering. In the end, I made a few different samples and went with the contrasting cloth. When closing the boards for the first time, lift the board gently and watch that the paper doesn't pop up in the joint area. If it looks like it will, prod it down with a bone folder as you continue to close the book. You'll notice that my boards are warped inwards significantly. I did something rather silly. I run a dehumidifier in the bindery, but I only turn it on when the humidity hits 51%, and then normally run it for a few hours until it gets down to 46%. It is normally set for a target humidity of 45%. Somehow it got set to 30% and I forgot it, and it was left on all day. Thus the boards have been overpulled. Once the book has absorbed a bit of moisture again, the boards will flatten out. I'll quickly glue the label on the spine with the EVA. In previous videos, you will have heard me mention that the stretch of the pastedown caused by the moisture in the adhesive means that it can extend past the fore-edge of the text and can be seen. I normally trim the width of the pastedown by 1 millimeter or so to stop this happening. I usually mention that you can wait until after and trim it then, but I don't think I've demonstrated this. I thought it was time I did. I close the book and see how much the pastedown extends past the text. This is how much I want to trim. I open the book again and using a very sharp knife and a steel rule, I carefully cut through the paper but not the cloth. Because it was put down with methyl cellulose, it will peel off easily. At worst, a tiny amount of water on a cotton tip will help lift it off. Just use the lightest pressure to cut the paper without cutting the cloth. The final step is to tip the coloured end paper to the outside white leaf at the fore-edges to make the flexible made leaf. So that is one of my recommendations on how to bind a thesis. The emphasis in this style is robustness. This book will take very regular use for decades and is very functional, opening nice and flat. As always, I really appreciate you hitting the like button. If you're able and want to, you can support the making of more videos like this through Patreon or with a one-off contribution, and the details are in the description below. To find videos I've made on specific topics or other projects, the best place to go is the DAS Bookbinding Video Guide. It's the index to the channel. If you want to be notified of my future videos, please hit the subscribe button and select the notification bell. Until next time, cheerio.